Right. Thanks. And I'm going to throw it back to Hannah to reintroduce things. All right. So this is, for all of you watching at home, this is, we're talking about running for Neighborhood Council 101. And now that we've introduced all of our amazing speakers, I want to turn it over to Josh Nooney, who is going to be doing a little bit of introduction.
All right. Hello, everyone. Like I said before, I'm Josh Nooney. I'm on the Los Feliz Neighborhood Council. I am really happy to see so many progressives interested in running for neighborhood council and interested in local government. Neighborhood councils are the most local part of local government. So it is a great starting place to get involved in making progressive change happen in our city and making it a better place. What the neighborhood councils are advisory bodies that essentially are they're part of the city government structure. They officially have an advisory capacity in terms of advising the city council on different motions that are before it and whatever business is before the city council. They do have one non-advisory function, which is they get approximately, I think the number is like about $42,000 or so to distribute to nonprofit organizations and schools and other things like that within the neighborhood themselves. They can decide how they want to allocate that money or what they want to do with it. So that's a non-advisory thing, but for the most part, the primary business of neighborhood councils is going to be weighing in on stuff that is before the city council. So if a city council member brings a motion to make it illegal to sit or sleep or lie down on city sidewalks, for example, within a close proximity to a bridge home facility or in a freeway underpass or something, that's going to be a piece of municipal business that's considered by the city. And the neighborhood councils have an opportunity to weigh in and go on record officially and say either, we oppose this idea, we really don't think you should do this for these reasons, or we approve of this idea and, go ahead and we're happy that you're doing this. And this is for anything that comes before the city council members that they're going to vote on. When a neighborhood council passes their most official piece of, what you would call legislation, and as far as legislation goes for a neighborhood council, it's called the community impact statement. And that document gets officially attached to the council file, the city council file, for any individual piece of business. So that's like the most formal thing that a neighborhood council can do. And it is really kind of like the heart of its advisory role to the city council. There are other things that a neighborhood council can do, such as just informally write letters to city council members or to other people within the city government structure. And, sometimes you will have opportunities as city council members to interact with school board members or with state assembly members or others, but officially, your advice is, there's debates around about that, but I'm not even going to get into it. But the main thing I'm just going to focus on, the basic stuff, is you're going to be dealing with the city council members. And so if, for example, you want a city council member to bring a certain piece of business before the city council that doesn't currently exist, so there's no council file to which to attach a community impact statement, you could write a letter saying, "Dear council member X, we really think that this particular piece of housing policy or homelessness policy or economic stimulus or whatever it may be would be a good thing for our city. We think that you should direct the city attorney to research its viability, or you should direct..."
I haven't even filled them out yet.
So. Oh, somebody hasn't filled something out.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Totally distracted by this person's unmuted audio. So anyway, basically, with the letter, you can. So we've done this on the Los Feliz Neighborhood Council. We wrote a letter to David Rue saying, we really think that you should bring or look into, at the very least, or probably bring a motion to bring vacancy tax to Los Angeles, to tax vacant rental units and incentivize owners to move them and actually get people living in them instead of holding them vacant. And lo and behold, he did do that. He did bring that motion, and that was because, in part, we wrote this this letter, strongly advocating for that. So that's another form of advocacy that a neighborhood council can conduct. If you'll notice that both of these things, a community impact statement and a letter, are forms of soft power. It is not that the neighborhood council can dictate what happens in the city, but it can be a effective channeling of community sentiment, and it can alert the city council members to, this is what the public is thinking about this, or this is what a bunch of leaders within this neighborhood are thinking about this. And if I go ahead with this and everybody's really upset, like, I'm going to hear about it, it's going to make my life politically more difficult, whatever. And obviously, if you have more neighborhood councils weighing in on things, that is better, because the soft power increases. And that is why sometimes neighborhood councils work together a little bit to be like, we're going to all take a stand on this. And that's a great thing that progressives can do in running for neighborhood council. I will say one general thing, which is that the history of neighborhood councils in the city is not always a good one. I mean, there are a lot of neighborhood councils that take stands on issues that, as progressives, we wouldn't identify with, right? They stand in the way of progress and making our city a better place. And they can kind of like be institutions that enshrine and hold up the status quo, and when it benefits a certain small number of people at the expense of many others. And so for that reason, I think there has been a shift that has been happening as more, younger people, more progressive people are getting involved in local politics and paying attention. And I think that's continuing. And that's part of what you all represent and what's so great about you being here, because we really need to change all the neighborhood councils in the city and make sure that people like us have voices on them, and that they are megaphones for good politics, which is something that they potentially could be and that they are not always currently. Although there are some really great neighborhood councils doing amazing work right now. Last thing I'll say about the structure of neighborhood councils is that, you have to run for these seats and get elected. If there's a vacancy, you can get appointed by the other members of the neighborhood council. But assuming there are no vacancies, you're going to have to run and get elected for these seats. You will be on a body that is representing up to like 40,000 stakeholders. That's a pretty big deal. And the number of votes that you have to win it varies widely. I mean, in certain neighborhood councils, it's a really big deal. I mean, there are people organizing and doing serious political work, mobilizing votes in order to ensure that they can get a seat on that neighborhood council. Other neighborhood councils are literally struggling to make quorum. They're struggling to even have enough people voluntarily deciding they want to be on the neighborhood council to even have a meeting and do any business. So depending on where you are in the city, the realities of you becoming a neighborhood council member, it's possible for everybody, but it's just the amount of work that you have to put into it is going to be very different. Once you do become a neighborhood council member, should you decide that you do want to, you're probably going to, every council has a different structure, but at least on our council, I think a lot of others, you have to join a couple committees or you have to chair a committee. The committees are topic specific. They are like housing committees, transportation committees, homelessness committees, business committees, all kinds of different stuff. Those committees have meetings in between the governing board meetings, which are the governing board is the elected board of the neighborhood council. The committees meet in between those meetings, and they dive a little bit deeper into the business of that's related to that topic. And this mirrors the city council structure. And so the committees also, the nice thing about neighborhood council committees is that they're open to any stakeholder. So you don't have to run for neighborhood council to even get involved in your neighborhood council. If for some reason you're not able to do it, it's okay. You can still participate by being a committee member. You can bring a motion to your committee. It can, to say, I want the neighborhood council to put forward a community impact statement on this piece of city council business. And then the committee can vote on it, and then it goes up to the governing board, and your neighborhood council will consider your piece of business. That's a really cool way to get involved. I highly encourage people who are thinking about running for neighborhood council, which is ostensibly many of you because you are here, to actively investigate your neighborhood council by starting to attend committee meetings and governing board meetings to see what's going on, what people are talking about, and what feels resonant and right to you, and how you would want to participate. That is basically it. In terms of the one last thing I'll say about the representation structure is that there are different types of representatives. This is all determined on a very individual basis based on the bylaws of the particular neighborhood council that, the district that you are in. So you could be a geographic representative. That's what I am. I'm the District C representative of the Los Feliz Neighborhood Council. There are 5 different geographic sub-districts. Or you could be a community interest representative that's like the public safety representative, or the education representative, or the recreation representative. And there's different types of, every council creates representatives the way that they want to create them. And so those are at large, so that, for me, when I ran, only the people that lived in this subsection of Los Feliz could vote for me because they were District C residents, or not live. They could rent there. They could, live, own or rent, or they could work there or be part of like an organization that's based there. If you are, sorry, I lost my train of thought. The at-large districts. If you are an at-large representative or a community interest representative, like public safety or something, people from your entire neighborhood, the entire boundaries of the neighborhood, can vote for you. So you don't have to worry about getting people from one particular spot. And so the composition of different boards is going to be very different. That's another thing that you should look into and investigate. That's really all I'm going to say about what they are. They can do great things. Just one example that is not in the letters and CIS category that we did in Los Feliz was that, when COVID struck and everybody was in their houses and nobody knew what was going on or how to go, if it was safe to go to the market or whatever, at the beginning in the spring, we stepped up and created this like website called Los Feliz Helps, where we got all these volunteers who were interested in going to the market and getting groceries for people who were more vulnerable and who didn't feel safe leaving their homes. And we papered the neighborhood with flyers saying, like, you can call this number and we will get you groceries. Like, we will get you things that you need. And we did that. We connected neighbors and made that happen. And it was a beautiful thing. And that was something that having a really dedicated group of volunteers from the neighborhood who are in these positions could come together and create. There was even more than just being an advisory body. It was really, it was doing something for the people that you live around. And that is the best thing that you could possibly do as a neighborhood council member. And that is something that all of you could take action and make happen should you decide to run and do this. I may have forgotten some things, so I just want to ask my fellow neighborhood council members and ex-neighborhood council members who are on this panel if there are any other important details that you think people should know about what the neighborhood councils are.
Yeah, Josh. I don't know if people are aware how neighborhood councils got their start. Do you want to tell them about that?
Okay, so I'm not very well versed in the history. I know they started in '99. I think it was in reaction to the Valley secession movement, but somebody who has more expertise in this area is welcome to tell the story.
Yeah, it was in part that. I would also submit that it had something to do with the lack of representation people felt in neighborhoods most severely impacted by the riots. There were a few years before, but yeah, it's important to note that to quiet the secession movement in the Valley, the city charter was revised. And so we get our authority as neighborhood councils from the city charter. So everything we do is codified in the city charter, and hasn't been revised very much as far as I know. And then it wasn't until the year 2000 that they started to actually really develop councils. And you'll see some of the the oldest ones are in the Valley. So that's where the neighborhood councils actually started to grow, was from the Valley. It has since, though, spread all across the city, which has, as you suggested, changed the dynamic in a lot of places from more sort of old school conservative homeowners to renters, progressives, newcomers, anti-gentrification folks. So we're at a sea change in not only the compositions of neighborhood councils, but in recognizing the power of neighborhood councils to push progressive policies forward throughout the city. And that's hopefully why everybody's here today.
I'll say one thing, on the history, like there was a big push back the 90s and 2000, like to make the city council smaller because we only have 15 council members and like each one of them represents almost 300,000 people, whereas New York, twice the size, has 3 times the number of council members. So this was kind of a compromise. And frankly, I would have preferred had, they had created far more council members. And I think that's a big movement goal. But in the meantime, as much as a conservative kind of bulwark that these councils started out being, especially in the Valley and other places, like we can use them. We can use this infrastructure for our own purposes. So.
I think one thing that I would add, Josh, is, as much as we can talk about the relationship between the councils and the city council and the city and the policies and history of the councils, one thing I would add is we also deal with the day-to-day needs of people in the neighborhood. People will come to you with my Amazon box was stolen, or I'm getting evicted, or there are homeless people on the sidewalk. What can we do to help them? Or, hey, my business just opened. How can you help me? Neighborhood councils are at a granular level a resource and a bridge between what the city resources are, but also the programs and resources of the neighborhood council itself. So it's really important that when you are thinking of running, it's not just this big political post, because it absolutely isn't. You're also there to serve the people and their needs locally. And I think to kind of what David mentioned earlier too, this often can get forgotten. So I just want to make sure to center that and keep that in mind, that we're putting in work, not just for the city as a whole, but more importantly for your neighborhood. Just to give you some perspective, Palms, which is in West LA, has 44,000 residents, which is 3,000 more residents than Culver City, which is its own municipality. So just think about that, right? A neighborhood council is bigger than its own municipality, but doesn't have the same level of representation or resources. So you get to play a role there in the voices and needs of the residents.
I'd add to that, depending on what neighborhood council you're running in, to read up on the requirements. So for Mid-City West, ours is that you can live, work, own property, or be a stakeholder. So they've defined the stakeholder definition a little bit more, but basically, like if you attend church, if you go to school, and there's just different things that could qualify you. And for the election, I am running as a business representative. Our group kind of strategized this because most people tend to run for the at-large representative. That's the most contested seat because it's there's less requirements in it. Like you don't have to be a zone representative, where in the zone you have to live in that specific zone. So the at-large is anyone can kind of run for that. But in Mid-City West, our other groups don't have those specific requirements either. So every neighborhood council is different. I would just look up what your specific neighborhood council has as requirements for the different positions.
Totally. That's a really good point, Jenny. I can spotlight Lauren as well. I wanted to now kind of open up the floor for some of our experts to share, really all of them. We've got plenty of time. So anyone who would like to spend a few minutes sharing your personal narrative of, running for neighborhood council, whether that was this past year or whenever, we'd love to hear your story. Can we have Erin, would you mind going first?
Sure. Is this where we're talking about like why you should run kind of as well?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I heard about the neighborhood councils like in 2016, was like, I need to get involved. This is the time. I'm sure a lot of people similarly were like, oh God, what happened? I need to do something. So I saw that Palms was my neighborhood council, and I decided to apply for the residential representative seat that was open at the time. And when I was running, a few people had warned me, like, go to a meeting or something first. Like, neighborhood councils are really different. So yours might be like really functional, or it might be really dysfunctional. It might be very progressive or not so progressive. So I was nervous to go, but I went, and Andy is laughing because the Palms Neighborhood Council, at least like he and the like team, the board at that time just really turned it around, like set this incredible foundation. They're such great leaders. And so I was like, oh, heck yeah, I want to be involved in this. So I applied, was appointed as residential rep, joined the green committee. Like, I'm not even sure why, but like 2 months later, the chair had a baby. So I became chair of the green committee. And then a lot of moving around, I became the vice president, and honestly wasn't even going to run, but I think it's sometimes hard for women, or hard for people who don't see like themselves reflected in leadership often, to run for something like a president of anything. But the person who I was running against was really like anti-homelessness, or not anti-people, anti-humanity kind of. And I wanted to make sure that people were supported, people felt welcome in our community, and that we were like focusing first on supporting and giving resources to people rather than criminalizing them and pushing them away. So I just decided to run, and now it's been a year and a half. I ran with a slate, which means we all ran as a group, 10 of us, and we all were elected, and it's been incredible. Everybody has been so amazing. Like, I think that my story is like very different than a lot of people's, because Palms happens to be mostly renters, and we're a fairly progressive area. So it was easy for us to kind of gain support as probably one of the more progressive neighborhood councils out there. And this has been, a crazy time to be a community leader, but I've felt so much hope from being involved in this, because we've, like Josh was talking about, we also did we called almost 3,000 seniors in our area to check in on them, and then we connected many of them with services. We partnered with a mutual aid organization to get folks services who weren't able to leave their homes, and just have done a lot of just community support during this time, as well as a lot of advocacy. So I think just take it with a like grain of salt what my story is, because some neighborhood councils are really frustrating to be a part of, but I think all the more reason for you to get involved. Neighborhood councils, the other thing I would mention that that they do is kind of like advocate for resources for their neighborhood. So depending on whether, if you're someone who cares about social justice and equity, depending on whether you're in an area if you're in an area, for instance, that's affluent and wealthy and have been advantaged by, our structurally oppressive system here in LA, being on your neighborhood council is important because you can be the voice to say, before we consider just like pushing people off the street or criminalizing homelessness, like let's try something else, or questioning when the priorities are seem maybe frivolous or out of touch. If you're in an area that's been disadvantaged by these systems, a lot of times like city council people are listening to neighborhood councils to see what they want and need, and they are responding to people who are the loudest, unfortunately. So those neighborhoods that are saying like, we need streetlights, or streetlights are broken, or we need tree trimming, that kind of stuff that just like keeps the neighborhood like clean and well resourced, the city council people are actually like listening to the neighborhood councils often for that information. So if you can help advocate for those resources in your neighborhood, it can be really helpful. And I also think that like if you're trying to get an understanding of how LA works and doesn't work as a city government, this is maybe the best way to get involved. I cannot believe how much I've learned in the last 3.5 years. Like started out not having any idea what a neighborhood council was, and now I'm like understand so much about how the city works, how I should advocate as a community member, and has also like created this incredible network of people both in my neighborhood and also just around the city who are working on progressive issues. So you kind of start to like see all of your groups like have these intersections between them, LA Forward and neighborhood councils. And I'm also in another organization called Leadership for Educational Equity. There's like a lot of people in that are also in this. And so it's a great way to start building your network. And like for the most, the biggest reason why I got involved was just to like feel like I belonged somewhere. LA is a really big place, and if you're new or even if you're not, it's sometimes hard to find community. And if you're lucky, neighborhood council can be that, or like part of that source of community. It's a way that I've gotten to know business owners in this area, community organizations, churches, and like people in different age groups too, like meeting parents and their children, meeting people that are much older than me. And I really don't think I would have had that opportunity had it not been for the neighborhood council. So I will put my email in the chat too if anyone wants to ask any other questions, but I'm just like, I think neighborhood council system is really important, and I'm so excited to see more progressive people involved, and really agree that there's like this is like a tipping point, I hope, where we can really start to work together and have more people kind of advocating for these really important issues that are coming to the table right now at the city council. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erin. And just as a reminder, we'll have more, opportunity to ask one-on-one questions in the breakout rooms in our smaller groups. I see lots of good questions and comments in the chat, which is awesome. So now we're going to go to Lauren to share her experience, and I will spotlight Lauren.
So hi, everybody. Interestingly, I had always intended to be a part of my neighborhood council. And the reason that that was delayed was I went to graduate school, and then I became very, very active in my labor union and became a union officer. I found my way back to the neighborhood council system when there was a drug dealer openly dealing on my block. And I represent District 6, which is on the far southern west side edge of Echo Park. And we had been long neglected along with District 1 or District 5 by both the city council itself and the neighborhood council. The Echo Park Neighborhood Council was very, very concentrated in the central part of Echo Park, and it came with a lot of at-large seats. One clue for me to how well a neighborhood council is working and how diverse it is how many at-large seats does it have? In my opinion, at-large seats favor a very small clique of people who are able to run for office without having to run against each other because they often live very close to each other. That being said, it was through my constant hectoring of my local field deputy to do something to get the police to act with this open drug dealing that led me to double back down and visit the neighborhood council. I started out with a committee. Joining outreach, I have communications experience, and I specifically wanted to work with the undocumented and immigrant communities, which, and this is important, we neglected to mention this earlier, neighborhood councils by charter are the only group that allows undocumented non-citizen stakeholders the right to vote and the right to run. And heretofore, that has been an underserved group, like youth, by neighborhood councils. And I am very excited this year that the city has given DUN, which is the organization that oversees the neighborhood councils, has given DUN a mandate and funding to do concentrated outreach to unhoused neighbors who can also run and vote, youth, and immigrants. And they'll be working with community partners in order to do this. So fast forward, I was appointed to a seat eventually. I ran successfully for re-election. And in my time on the board, I've been the Chief Information Officer. I've chaired the Outreach Committee. And currently my passion is the Homelessness and Housing Committee. I'm very, very proud of the work that we were able to do on that committee. And by the way, committees is where the fun stuff happens. Committee work is where you will be able to pick a place that speaks to your passion and interests and focus most of your energy on that. And it's most likely where you're going to actually be in contact with the neighbors that you've helped and who have heard your message. The committees are where it's at, bar none. A lot of the procedural stuff you have to go in board meetings is the price you pay for the great work you'll be able to do in your communities via committees. So one of the things that we've done, it took us 1.5 years of advocating with the city, but we were able to set up mobile showers for our unhoused neighbors. And around those mobile showers, we set up a pretty comprehensive services 1 day a week for our unhoused neighbors. I was in charge of the breakfast program, which required me to basically go to neighborhood businesses to get them to donate food, and then take charge of the kitchen crew for passing out. We didn't do any cooking. We only passed out ready-made food. It was there in that work that I realized that how many food insecure seniors we have, because we went from people who were clearly unhoused to people who were clearly still housed, but didn't have enough money to carry them through for food. And that was really gratifying work. Recently, I've changed my emphasis less on homelessness services, because that part of our committee is very, very robust and very active, to moving on to doing what I'm calling tenants' rights in the time of COVID, which is to put together and moderate forums to empower people so that they don't self-evict. These are the kind of services that neighborhood councils are probably best at. And with groups like Progressive Alliance that Josh started, you can actually liaise with other neighborhood councils, which I've done. So what we do is we say somebody in Silver Lake is having an event dealing with tenants' rights, we will use our neighborhood council's social media and communications platforms to trumpet that event, and so forth. And when we have one, somebody else will do the same. And this means that you're increasing not only the number of people who get it, but if you miss one in one neighborhood, you can go and attend a session in another. Working a lot to get language justice, to make sure that that our work isn't only English focused. And while it can be frustrating with neighborhood councils, doing that work for me is bar none the most rewarding thing. And it's very, very necessary now, probably more than ever. I will also put my details in the chat. So if anybody wants to follow up with me, I'm in Echo Park. We abut both MacArthur. There's like 2 MacArthur neighborhood councils, everything in Region 6, and even downtown LA. I'm happy to help anyone who has questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I've never heard anyone so excited about committees, which I think tells us the magic of this organizing opportunity. Awesome. Okay, I believe next we have Andy. Is that right, Andy? And then after that, we'll go to Jenny to hear some more perspectives.
Thank you, Hannah. And hi, everybody. So the question is like, why should you run? And personally, I ran because I believe in the collective power of people to come together and help those in need, to help our neighborhood, to advocate to the city, to get resources for where you live. That was why I ran. But I think most Angelenos, like, we don't get to that point like all of a sudden. I think most people don't even know about neighborhood councils or how they work. And I think that's why so many of you are here today. And I share the excitement of the panelists here that it's so great to see so many people. My recommendation as you think about why you should run is to think about what particular issues you care about in your neighborhood and whether the neighborhood council is the right mechanism for you to take action on them. Running was a really eye-opening experience where you really get to meet your neighbors. Most elections are not more than 100 or so people. I think the highest elections have maybe a few thousand people that vote. So civic engagement, I think, is something that's really important, right? Like, how can we speak for a neighborhood when not even half of the neighborhoods are voting in the neighborhood council elections, right? But if you do run, I hope that you get to meet your neighbors. I hope that you get to inspire more people to vote. And once you're in the neighborhood council, that you identify a committee that with an issue that you really care about, that you consider an officer seat. The officer seat will allow you to have provided administrative leadership to the neighborhood council. But let's just really quickly, issues like sustainability, issues like infrastructure, transportation, mobility, land use, homelessness, youth outreach, food insecurity. I mean, these are things neighborhood councils can really make a difference. To me, they're double-edged swords because as I talk about all of these issues can go one way or another. I'll give you an example. When I was transportation chair, I had the owner of an apartment complex reach out to me saying, we have all these vehicles with homeless people across my apartment complex. Can you please rezone this street area so parking overnight is banned? So as a neighborhood council member, in that case, I had the choice to advocate whether to redo that street and take out overnight parking or not. And you represent technically both constituencies there. But I think that's where also you have to think about who are you serving? And I think for me, my guiding compass was those in most need. And we kept, as a neighborhood council, we decided to not redo the overnight parking in that area to allow our homeless neighbors to sleep there, because at that same time, the city was criminalizing sleeping in your car overnight while shelters couldn't house people. So we can talk about the larger things, but I just want to talk about moments like that where you are going to be tasked with representing people on both ends of an issue. Start thinking about where you would stand in those issues. But I also want you to think bigger than any of the stuff that we've talked about here. I'll give you an example. Josh mentioned that neighborhood councils get $40,000, $42,000 for some. That is money that you can do big things with. I'll give you an example of what we did in Palms. In partnership with Metro and the Santa Monica Blue Bus system, which runs through Palms, we distributed, I think something like 3,000 Metro Pass cards with bus fares to encourage transportation use to our Metro station, to use our buses. And it was just a service to allow people to move and get out of their cars for trips shorter than 15 minutes around our neighborhood. Those are things that you can do. I'll give you an example of things that can go the other way that maybe some of you have heard. There was a neighborhood council near Palms where an underpass had homeless folks living in there, and they chose to place boulders in there so homeless people wouldn't live there. So there's a great deal of responsibility that you carry if you are going to be a part of a neighborhood council. So I hope that as much as we talk about all the terms and lingos and responsibilities, that you kind of forget about that for a second and also spend some time thinking why you want to run, what you care about, what seats you want to run. Teach yourself and spend some time about whether you're also willing to commit time. I've seen a lot of questions about time. It is a time commitment. If you're going to run just to kind of show up to the meetings, that's maybe, let's say 6 hours a month. But if that's all you're doing, then little action or impact is going to come from you, because the real work is not really at the meetings, but what's happening off the meetings. Who are you outreaching to? What coalitions are you building? Are you writing a community impact statement? Are you building a new program? Those are things that happen not at the meetings. At the meetings, you're voting, you're arguing, which is actually what a lot of these neighborhood councils often tend to be, just a lot of arguing and very little action. And why there's been a lot of arguments about why they shouldn't exist. But I know that if everybody in this room runs and you run with an intended issue, that you can make a difference in your neighborhood council, in your neighborhood, but more importantly, that we can start to change the perception of what neighborhood councils are. And we can demonstrate to people that in this city, we have a granular level of democracy with resources to do good work. And I say this because right now our city is in so much pain. We can mention homelessness, which is a really obvious one, but there's a lot of other issues happening that I hope that we can all tackle together in our neighborhood council. So that's why I ran a neighborhood council in Palms, and we got to do some good work. And like Aaron mentioned, we had a very NIMBY neighborhood council before our slate moved in. We ran against them. We won. They were all voted out. We came in, we set in some programs, and really, really grateful that we had an amazing set of office people that I ran with. And Aaron is an example of how that continues, right? What you build in the neighborhood council continues with the people that run next.
Amazing. Thank you, Andy. So now we'll move to Jenny.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so for me, getting involved in my community, oh, am I muted? Okay. Getting involved in my community is something that I've always done. For me, I think it builds relationships and it strengthens communities. And for me, I'm someone who's really shy and introverted. So if I'm part of a group, that's how I kind of get out to the world. That's how I meet other people that are like-minded. If I'm involved with transportation. So if I join a transportation group, like that's where I meet other people who I can go on a bike ride with, or I can go on a walk with. For me, that was a big motivator, meeting other people. I had just moved to Mid-City West about a year ago. So I wanted to meet people who lived in my neighborhood who had similar interests. And I personally think that you people should be tuned into what's happening locally, right? Because that's where a lot of the things that really impact our lives, that's where a lot of the decisions are made. So if you're paying attention, you can know what's going on. And nothing is more local than the neighborhood council. And for me, um, I feel pretty like lucky that Mid-City West is very progressive. I know there's a lot of neighborhood councils who that is not the case, that they're filled with a lot of people who block progress on transportation or housing or homelessness, affordable housing, that those type of projects are often, just voted no on. But even so, my board is pretty progressive. And when I ran, I felt like I was one of the least experienced people that ran. There was like 2 lawyers, there was a school principal, there was a librarian, and they were all much older than me. And I was very transparent about who I was. And I was like, I'm 29 years old. I was born in El Salvador. I'm a renter here. I, want to go to grad school. Still haven't figured stuff out. And I wanted to run because I wanted, as a young woman of color that's a renter, I want to add representation to the board. Like when we vote, does that vote include the different voices of our city? Does our vote represent, young people, older people, renters, people that own houses, people that are in wheelchairs? Like our community is so diverse, and we need to have diverse voices on our board. And I got the most votes, so I think people like that. And I see, with more progressives getting elected to LA City Council with Nithya and just like all around LA County, I feel like there's a hunger, and there's, now that they've won, I feel like that can even happen at a more local level. Like I feel like if we change our neighborhood councils to flip more progressive, we can get more stuff done, and things can get just blocked less often. So I'm really hopeful about this, and I would encourage you to figure out why you want to run and be honest with that. And I'm here to answer any questions. I heard a lot of time commitment stuff. I'm definitely, I only joined one committee. I joined the transportation committee, and I feel start with one and you can always add more. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenny. Okay. I believe now we're gonna hear from David, our executive director at LA Forward, about just briefly about the process of what it entails to run. So I'll go ahead and spotlight David. And then after that, we're gonna have plenty of time for Q&A in our breakout rooms.
Thank you so much, Hannah. And thank you to all the wonderful speakers. So I mean, this is an election. These are elections. I've saw questions about how do you win? How much money does it take? I know when I ran back in 2014, I was on the West LA Neighborhood Council for 2 years. I raised some money almost just as a lark. I didn't have much money at the time. I just left grad school and was unemployed, but I raised money so I could do print up flyers and stuff like that and build a website. But the truth is, you don't actually really, the amount of money that you need to win, it's not like you're hiring consultants or doing paid ads. The real key, is that you work together with other people. The way I won election is kind of funny. I hadn't actually been too involved, even though I lived in my neighborhood a long time, but I filed, I had I think what it was a good candidate statement, like Jenny's saying, you have an opportunity when you file, but actually right after you file, to submit a statement, a photo if you want, of why you're running. And obviously writing that in a compelling way is important. Being authentic to who you are and what you want to accomplish is important. And I said that, and then I had the opportunity to speak at a candidates forum that was organized by, I think, an official forum. People heard what I said, and actually I ended up getting, accidentally, folks in the community were really frustrated with the incumbent council, and they put me on their slate without asking me. So I showed up, I was out there, it was pre-COVID times, so I was out at the local farmers market every weekend. I was handing out flyers. Election day comes, it's a Sunday, I think, and I'm handing out flyers, and I see all these people walking over from the Japanese American churches and Buddhist, the temples, like they voted in block and they liked what I had to say. But don't count on that happening. Really, what you want to do, and what we're really excited to do here at LA Forward, is that you could take the going solo approach of, I'm going to talk to all the people I know in the district, and but that will only get you so many votes. Really, the key is to run on a slate, as other people have talked about, and is to find, every neighborhood council is different in terms of like which positions it has, but you want to look up, what your neighborhood council is and which positions there are, and then you want to figure out like where does it make most sense for you to run, and can you find other progressive folks who want to run with you, so that you can reach out to the people and tell them about yourself and those other folks, and they can reach out to people they know, and you can kind of build, maybe you have a name for your slate, build recognition of that, and that you multiply the power of your network by all kind of connecting with one another. So there are, the way that it always works basically is that the elections are staggered. So if you live basically in a bunch of the mid-city districts and the Hollywood Hills districts, your filing deadline is like December 28th, right? And the election is March 16th, which is why we're having this event right now, to make sure that in these important districts, people sign up to run. A week later, March 23rd is a lot of the downtown LA and vicinity districts, and the filing deadline for that's January 5th. And basically, like, it's staggered over a period. The elections run from a period of March 16th to sometime in June. And we'll talk more about like the actual process of signing up, but you do it online. You can do it on the website, the Empower LA website, which I'm posting in the chat. It's run by the LA City Clerk, and you basically, you put up, you basically have to show your identity and provide some documentation about why you're qualified to run. Not like why you're a good person, but like, are you a stakeholder? Do you live or work or own property or whatever in that neighborhood, or whatever to fit that criteria that your neighborhood council has. So that's like the formal part, and it doesn't cost any money or anything to file, I believe. And so that's kind of the easy part, is filing. And of course, you can file now, and then you can withdraw later, and that's totally okay. But if you want to look at the deadline for your particular neighborhood council, and make sure you file before then, because you can always withdraw later, but you can't get on after the deadline. So that's step one. And then step two is forming a slate. And we're really, excited to this time around to be working internally with LA Forward, but also with a couple other organizations to help progressives in these different seats find one another and run together, to help, good folks who are progressive, are committed to kind of social justice and to public good in their neighborhood and being of service, to find one another. So we encourage you, today, if you can, to sign up and we'll walk through that process online a little bit later. But if you think you might be interested in running, and this meeting hasn't totally turned you off to it, I'm putting a link to a thing on our website, like sign up, and we'll help match you with people in your own neighborhood council. And what we're really looking to do as LA Forward, and as a part of a broader network of progressive groups, is like not just to connect you to other progressives, but to give advice. So this is like not the last session we're going to have on neighborhood councils. We'll be happy to like give further advice. We just wanted to make sure people had this on the radar, so they file. And then we're happy to give further advice about, how do you effectively run and all that stuff, and what does it look like when you're finally on the council, and yada yada yada. But I'm going to put that link in the chat, and feel free to sign up if you think you might be interested. So I'm going to stop talking and turn it back over to him.
Thanks, David. So while you're in the spotlight, can you help me with the sorting into breakout rooms while I have you here? here, so to speak. So what we're going to do now is move into our Q&A section. So as I mentioned before, we wanted to give people the opportunity to have a bit more face time with our experts who have done an awesome job of sharing their, shared and differing perspectives on neighborhood councils. So what we're going to do is we're going to assign, each of the facilitators to their rooms, and we're going to randomly assign attendees. You'll be with a group of other folks. Yes, David, I will happily make you a host. Give me 1 second. Awesome. And yeah, as David mentioned, there's nothing to lose. You can fill out the form, or rather you can file and then decide to withdraw, and that's totally fine. So, keep an open mind. I also really like what Andy said about figuring out what your priorities and your kind of intentions are, being really deliberate about it in that way. So there's lots of important things to think about, but we encourage you to, to step outside your comfort zone a little if you have the capacity and maybe run. So I think any minute now we'll be catapulted into our respective breakout rooms. So, if you have a question that, what'd you say?
Hopefully I do this right. Yeah, I may move around the host a little bit, but yeah. Okay,
Cool.
here you go.
Thanks, David. Awesome. Something I was mentioning to my breakout room that I just wanted to reiterate to the full group is, even if you had questions that you haven't yet had answered, as David mentioned, this is not the last opportunity for support and guidance from LA Forward. You shouldn't have to feel alone in this process. It can be confusing, and we want you to feel empowered, and hope you feel that way after tonight. But we want you to feel that you have our support as you run. If you're sitting here going like, what's a slate? Or how do I get on a slate? Or should I get on a slate? There's these different strategies. We're here to support and guide you through all of that so that you can be successful and learn a lot. I think I'll pass it over to David or Josh if there are any kind of last steps or notes we want to end on.
I guess David should probably close us out. I just wanted to say that, yeah, I think we're really excited about you guys and about the possibility that you'll step up and do this. It is a way that we can change the city for the better. And so I hope you guys will do it. It is a really great thing to try and experience, like regardless of what happens, even if you run and you don't win, you will meet the people from the neighborhood council, like through the process, and then you can have a very awesome career as a committee member. And then you can get appointed to be a neighborhood council member as soon as somebody resigns from the board. Like that happens all the time. There's so many times when people who run in an election and don't win then get appointed by the board as soon as there's a vacancy. So I would just encourage everybody to do it. Seriously, think about it. It's a great life experience. And the other thing is that it is very, the way that you are going to win if you decide to do this is going to be very particular to your neighborhood and the structure of your neighborhood council, both in terms of the number of people that you're going to ally with for a slate, and also the strategies of what you're going to say and how you're going to reach out to people. And that is stuff that that I'm excited about helping you with. I think all of us are excited about helping you with. And so that's very particular, individualized advice. And I think that once people take a step of actually committing and making this happen and deciding they want to do this, we will be there to help support you through that process. And that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Yeah. And we really hope this is like you said, this is just the beginning. This is really exciting because so many of you are like totally new to LA Forward, have never been on our email list, just signed up. So really welcome all of you. We try this to be a welcoming and friendly community, fiercely committed to social justice, but welcoming and friendly. And yeah, we're going to do more on how to run effectively, how to effectively run. But the first step is signing up to declare. So if you're in a in places like, I'll post actually a list of all the neighborhood councils where the deadlines are coming up in December 28th. So if you live in any one of these places, like, you need to sign up ASAP. So all these Hollywood neighborhood councils, like, really important that you do it now before it's too late. And you don't need to have your statement ready. You don't need to have your photo ready, but like, just take that step. And then after that, a week later, January 5th, basically all the downtown and downtown adjacent, neighborhood councils are up. So, check that out. I will post again one more time a link to, so you can sign up. It's a page right here on the LA City Clerk's website. If you just go there, if you're having trouble, we can walk you through the process. You can email anybody who dropped their email in the chat. You can email me. I'll drop my email in the chat again. But we'll definitely do something like this again. And yeah, really excited that you all are considering doing this. If you're still considering running and you want to make sure we follow up with you individually, really love if you fill out the form that I just put in the chat at losangelesforward.org/run-for-city-council, run for neighborhood council. And that way we'll know which neighborhood council you're in and can help pair you with other people, connect you with other people in that district. So hopefully this was helpful, and I'm happy to stick around for a while, but yeah, thank you all for being here, and then I turn off the recording now.